All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher, joined back by my comrade, Drew Dinsick, who is on the island of Aya Ephemia in Greece, right? Drew, still in Greece?
Yeah, it's fishing town we're staying is Aya Ephemia. We're on the island of Kefalonia in the Ionian Sea. So just an absolutely spectacular vacation. This was top of list, most wanted to do. And so far it's lived up to the hype in every way.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm on Blackley Road in Stamford, but we have similar blue backdrops, and we will talk about the NFL today. Were you able to watch much football on Sunday, Drew?
Actually, I was. The 10 o'clock slate, my Pacific 10 a.m. usual slate started at about 8 p.m. here, so caught most of those games. Slept through the afternoon slate, which was a dud anyway. Actually, I don't know, maybe there was some drama in the Chiefs game, I guess, but we'll get to that in a bit, I suppose. And then, woke up at halftime of Texans Bears, and probably should have just slept through that one because that was not very good football, and didn't really know why the refs decided they wanted to be the show for a lot of the ending moments there, really costing, I guess, Texans covered the closing number, but, surely some folks with bigger numbers on the Texans were a little disappointed that the Bears got that field goal opportunity there at the end. But no, I'm pretty well caught up. Spent my morning, had my coffee, read my Kevin Cole Substack. It was, I'm very, very up on what's going on in the NFL. So I'm fired up, a little less in tune with the injury news this morning, but otherwise, the NFL never sleeps.
Yes. Congratulations to Lan Clark for being the star of Sunday Night Football, which I was very happy that Mike Tirico alluded to on air, where I think he said, seen a lot of Lan Clark tonight. Not much CJ Stroud and Nico Collins, but plenty of Lan Clark. Another guy we didn't see much of in highlight packages, Drew, was Bryce Young. We're going to talk about the Panthers, and then we're going to talk Ravens, Cowboys, and the Minnesota Vikings in the NFC North, and we'll close out with Offensive Player of the Year. But let's start with Bryce Young and the Panthers, because as woeful as that team and franchise is at the moment, as unbearable as their level of players on the field, I think from a pricing perspective, Bryce Young is actually quite compelling now, because this is pretty rare that you get this type of situation where he is playing, like, I think pretty clearly the worst quarterback in the NFL, but there is still an attachment to give him a shot because he was the number one pick in the draft 16 months ago or whatever. He was negative 0.76 EPA per play on Sunday, which means that, every time you drop back to pass, you're losing 3/4 of a point. He is just completely broken. Mentioned this before. I've never seen someone do what Bryce Young is doing now, where he's just staring edge rushers in the face for 2 seconds while they charge at him and just not doing anything, just eating it constantly, not trying to make them miss, not trying to throw the ball away, not trying to throw the ball to a teammate, which would be the best option in that scenario. So the Raiders are 7-point favorites. Oof. How do you price the Panthers right now? Are they just like 10 points worse than your average team, the way this is tracking?
Yeah, and I mean, this isn't unprecedented entirely. If you think back to the year, I think it was the first Brian Flores coached year for the Dolphins, where they just had a completely unplayable roster, and they get shut out by the Patriots 20-0 as or 23-0 as 20-point dogs, and then they open up week 3. I think they were, I want to say 23-point dogs on the road at Dallas and didn't cover. And it was like, this sort of thing early in the season where a team is just not ready to play and there's nothing going right. And, you kind of look for reasons to say, well, this is too many points this early in the season. Well, you really can't say that, because we came into this season expecting the Panthers were going to be at or near the bottom of the NFL. And yes, while there were reasons to be optimistic that a new coaching regime was going to be able to find some ways to show some signs of, some semblance of just, cohesion and, functionality. We haven't seen it through 2 weeks. And, the Bryce Young questions right now are fascinating because pretty clearly the mission will change at some point this season for the Panthers if this doesn't turn around rapidly, because you need to evaluate 52 other guys on that roster if you're going to rebuild this team. And if you're not getting even remotely, kind of playable, quarterback out of Bryce Young, then you need to put Andy Dalton out there so that you can evaluate the rest of these guys. And, realistically, Bryce Young looks like he needs more time to develop if he will ever. And he may be able to do that better on the bench than just staring at a pass rush. Also realistically, Bryce Young may just not ever be the answer there, at which point, I don't know that it's fair to the rest of the players in the team, the vets, the guys who are trying to, stay on NFL rosters to put them in these situations where, they're going to have a tough time getting another gig somewhere else once you cut bait with a guy who's had 5 years of service in the league. So it's a really nasty situation. And I definitely wonder what those conversations are like in terms of how they're setting intermediate goals for this season, short-term, intermediate term goals for this season, so that they can get something, in positive momentum as far as, bottoming out and rebuilding this team. The loss of Derek Brown certainly did not help. The fact that the defense really is not able to contribute either is not helping. I mean, you're seeing dysfunctional offense in Pittsburgh, and yet they're 2-0, right? So, if you at least were getting, the defense to chip in a bit here, maybe things wouldn't be quite so dire. But, treating the Panthers as like a, neutral, 10 to 14 point dog on a neutral, against an average team on a neutral, I don't think is unreasonable. Really, this is a shame, because I would like to see Dave Canales have opportunities to try different things. I would like there to be patience, but that's just not the way that this works in the NFL. And I think that they've gotten confirmation already that the system that they're trying to build for Bryce Young is not right. And that, there were a lot of people who suspected that was the case. And I think they've kind of maybe are getting that confirmation already, which is a good thing this early. And so hopefully they're able to try some different things. They realistically probably have 2 more weeks before you lose the locker room and it's Andy Dalton time. So not an easy thing to do to try to solve this on the fly against the pass rush that's as violent as the Raiders. And I think seeing the Raiders as a 7-point favorite is not something that I expected at all. But they have some very talented defensive players. They play hard. Pretty clearly, if you're getting a good Gardner Minshew game, then, you could just have a solid outcome for your team. So I get it. I think it's reasonable. I'd really like there to be an opportunity for the Panthers to try something different. And if they can't do that in season, with the, game plans for a given week, then they really need to think about putting Bryce Young on the shelf and having Andy Dalton take the snaps.
Indeed. All right, let's push ahead to Ravens Cowboys. It's open Cowboys -1.5. Quickly flip to Ravens -1. What do you make of this game, Drew? This is probably the quote unquote biggest game of week 3, given a Ravens loss. They go to 0-3, and it's not curtains on the season because they're still the Ravens. They still have a chance, but obviously up against it from there. And then the Cowboys, if they lose 1-2, and we're recording before we've seen Philadelphia play on Monday night, but then they would be hugely up against it to win the division.
Yeah. Fascinating part of this game, Jay, is that these two teams have disappointed through 2 weeks this season, even though, one of the biggest wins, most impressive wins in week 1 was the Cowboys. That feels now more like a dysfunctional Browns performance than it really was the Cowboys being awesome. So, I'm fascinated by this game mostly because these were the two teams that the market just sold with reckless abandon this summer. the delta in terms of season-long wins was the most aggressive bet under for both the Ravens and the Cowboys. People expected both of these teams to take a meaningful step backwards, and the performances we've seen on the field to this point absolutely back that up. So hat tip to, the market makers who, to a degree saw this coming. I think between these two teams, if you said one of these teams will, kind of solve some stuff and and be able to turn it around. I would lean more towards Cowboys than Ravens, just because I think the Ravens' problems are a little bit spookier. The Ravens' defense pretty clearly is not anywhere close to the unit that was top 3 in the NFL last year. Not just because of the way it's rostered. Some of the key players seem to have taken a step backwards, like Roquan Smith, maybe most importantly. And I think that the schematic advantages that McDonald had in year 2 with that team last year now look to be pretty important and pretty missed. The fact that the special teams continues to let this team down, and that the offense doesn't have any deep threats that can really open up the field, and that the offensive line has questionable protection issues. All of that to me marries pretty poorly with the Mike Zimmer coordinated defense that has just outstanding pass rush and speed, really, even more than anything. And I think Dallas's defense should be able to be a huge factor in this game in a way that keeps this in their favor. And I think Dallas's offense, and in particular CeeDee Lamb, matches up pretty well against whoever you would try to match him with, because speed can hurt this secondary for the Ravens, which has a couple of older players who aren't as fast as they used to be. So I think ultimately I would make the Cowboys non-trivial favorites here, which has me looking at this money line this week.
Okay. Yeah, I think the Cowboys, their issue, it's been the same thing for 2 years now, where they have no real interior of the defensive line. They don't have linebackers who can open the run game. And then if they don't get pressure, they seem to be exposed to explosives in the passing game. And so just the same old story. They're one of the stranger, more variable teams, I think, week to week, just given how much their quality of play just hinges on whether they have a lead or not, and how much their strengths and weaknesses are amplified by score. I think a lot more extremely than your typical NFL team. So yeah, it's not the most creative thing to say just bet alts in both directions on the Dallas Cowboys, but it kind of does feel like that, certainly, that if it gets out of hand and they have to protect against the team running the ball, then you get games that look like the New Orleans beatdown, where they were 6.5-point favorites and lost by 25 points.
Yeah.
So yeah, bit of a mess in Dallas. All right.
Well, I gotta ask you though, did it feel there was a little bit of a whiff of Dallas kind of looking past New Orleans, right? Like, I don't know that they necessarily had their A game even from the kickoff. And you worry a little bit about it in this game. Does Derrick Henry run amok on that second level in particular? And that could be. I think that this game definitely has a whiff of whoever scores first wins. And I'm fine leaning into Dallas, just considering that sort of the game breaking home runs threats for Baltimore just don't seem to be there.
Yeah, I think it's a red flag how poor the Chiefs offense looked against Cincinnati, given how Mahomes was able to put up like 0.42 EPA per play, I think, against the Ravens in week 1. And then he was at 0.19 against the negative 0.19 against the Bengals team that is supposed to have a bad defense. So that doesn't perhaps bode too well for Baltimore going forward. All right, the defending Super Bowl champions are back in primetime this weekend. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs hit the road for a battle with the Falcons in Atlanta. Coverage of the matchup begins at 7 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. All right, let's talk about your Minnesota Vikings. They are 2-point dogs at home to the Houston Texans. Total is 45.5, Sunday 1 p.m. game. We'll talk a bit about the division at the back end, but they've moved into second favorite to win the division after the Lions chalked up another unimpressive performance, this time accompanied by an L. And now this Texans team, who have emerged in the kind of big three, I guess, in the AFC with the Bills and the Chiefs, although they weren't particularly impressive against the Bears, I thought. What's your read on this game?
They're staying healthy. That's nice. And I think I love the Texans in this spot. I really like their matchup with the Vikings every which way. I will not disparage the Vikings on this podcast or anywhere. What they have done to do 2 wins this season, hard fought. Beating the Niners, a team that was an absolute truck on Monday Night Football to open the season, very, very impressive. But it was a little bit lucky. I think you caught the Niners in a very, very, very fortunate situation. You get them traveling across the country on a short week early in the season after an emotionally huge, awesome opening night, and without their most important weapon in Christian McCaffrey, and that kind of helped. It helped you with your game plan, and in general, they have always sort of had a way of making Brock Purdy look a little bit more mortal, and really that just helped open the door there. But I don't really hold, even having upgraded the Vikings to clearly, a top half of the NFL team, and a power number that should be over 0. There are still issues and questions. And when you go up against a team like the Texans that has so many different weapons and so many ways to hurt you in the passing game, I think this is not a good matchup for them. And then the flip side of the coin here, where you have a player like Derek Stingley Jr., who is just a covering monster, going up against Justin Jefferson, such a key cog in the Vikings passing game, who may be a step limited based on injury from the end of the Niners game. I think really just this sets up quite well for Texans to finally kind of put it all together, because through 2 weeks, they haven't really covered with glory, even though they were outside the number for almost the entire Colts game, and in general needed the help of the refs to get the Bears inside of 6 or get them to 6 in the Sunday Night Football game. It still is very, very impressive to see CJ Stroud mature. I know he's gotten a little bit lucky, and I haven't heard this covered anywhere, but I've watched every Texan snap so far, either live or on replay. And CJ Stroud has, I think, 3 picks that did not end up as picks this season, like clear picks. 2 of them in the Colts game, 1 of them in the Bears game. And, the Bears one was a little bit, it was a fluky athletic play. Like if Gordon makes that catch, like that's, one of the highlights of the week. But, Stroud is a little bit more reckless than the 3 picks we saw from him last year, which was, but there was some variance involved there. But I'm impressed with Brian Flores and what he's getting out of this defense, but this coverage unit is still very suspect. And a Texans team coming to town with 3 elite weapons at the wide receiver position and some chemistry building between CJ Stroud and Dalton Schultz looks like a problem. The Texans in general maybe missing Joe Mixon in this one because of the ankle injury, although he did come back into the game on Sunday Night Football. But honestly, if that forces Bobby Slowick into a more pass-heavy attack and maybe a less predictable wasting downs in the running game, then so be it. I think that helps the Texans offense. I don't know that Sam Darnold, I don't know that you're going to get much pressure on him because your offensive line for the Vikings is elite at home, and the Texans pass rush has been a little disappointing to this point in the season. But I still think Texans should be outside of 3 here. So I'm going to be on Houston.
Yeah, it feels like the Sam Darnold game is coming. I didn't think he was amazing against San Francisco. I thought he was much better against the Giants. He had the 1 bomb to Justin Jefferson and then made the 3rd down throws that he needed to on that final drive. But it was a little bit shakier, and now he gets a pretty fearsome Texans pass rush. Don't know about Joe Mixon yet, whether he's going to play. I would guess, as we're recording Monday afternoon, he's set to have an MRI. I would guess he's probably not going to play because of, 1, the mechanic of the injury looked brutal. 2, he came back in and then couldn't go back in after he initially came back for, I think, 7 snaps. So that's never a good sign when you're able to get back in, but then can't give it a go. And it's like they kind of needed him down the end because Cam Akers was fumbling at the goal line. And there was still, things at stake in the game. So that's a bad indicator. But we'll see. This Texans offense hasn't been, to your point, ultra impressive outside of running all over the Colts, which the Packers are able to do as well with 0 threat of a pass game. It hasn't really clicked yet outside of the Stroud to Nico connection. Let's pivot to the NFC North Division. The Lions have actually firmed since the start of the season. Where I think they were plus 130. Now they're plus 105. Don't necessarily agree with that. Vikings plus 275, Packers plus 375, Bears 7-1. Anyone that you like here at price?
I would make a case for not the Lions at price. The That is a really, really surprising development. I know that the loss of the Buccaneers, could have been viewed as fluky. There are certainly, elements of luck that got the Buccaneers that win, but the Lions have been pretty suspect now in two out of two performances, and it starts with Goff. Jared Goff right now would not rate to me as a top half of the NFL quarterback. And he was a top 6 guy last year, and that's a huge delta. And if he's taken a step backwards in his ability to run this offense, and if he is missing, threats in the offense, beyond Amon-Ra St. Brown, who, also is, for whatever reason, not been quite on the same page as Goff, then all of a sudden this becomes a pretty one-dimensional team that relies on the pass. That relies on the run blocking and the two-headed monster at running back. And okay, well, if you're up against a team that can defend the run well, they're going to make your life miserable for you. And that was what we saw in a large degree against the Buccaneers. I thought Buccaneers has always been a very disciplined run, just in general run defense. And Todd Bowles, that's sort of his bread and butter of making you beat them not the easy way. And I think there are many teams that will emulate that approach. And until we see the Jared Goff of 2023 show up, I'm kind of not interested in Lions whatsoever at market price. People still have them rated like a top 5 team in the NFL, and I have not seen the evidence to support that, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. So, Lions against Lions, anywhere close to pick. I'm against Vikings in this range as well, just because the schedule this next couple of weeks looks like they're going to take a big old step back to the pack, which, speaking of which, if the Packers are getting wins with Malik Willis and Jordan Love's absence, and the Packers are a team that I had kind of tapped as sort of a second half of the season darling, and you add even more fuel to that fire with Love kind of coming back from injury at some point here in the next couple of weeks, I have zero issues getting involved with the Packers anywhere around 4-1. I think they have, still very, very strong young core on the offensive side of the ball. And they look like the team in the NFC who people have sort of forgotten / given up on because of the Jordan Love injury, who I want, a legit stake in being there at the end of the, when the music stops. So to win the NFC North, it's still very, very much in range. You're one game behind a Vikings team with two opportunities to play them. And you may ultimately be tied with the Vikings after this week, in my opinion. So, Packers for me at 4-1, I think, is a solid play. And if not now, then soon.
Yeah, I think the thing with Detroit is that Jared Goff, his entire career has been a house of cards. And if the offensive line isn't elite, then he's not going to be elite. And this goes beyond the offensive line, what he's done so far. He's just been horrific. Like, the throws are just awful. I don't know what he's saying. And he went through a stretch like this in the middle to later part of last season, where there was a month where he played the Packers and the Bears twice, I think, where it just all broke. And right now the offensive line is not at the level that it was last season. I don't know why Jared Verse is wrecking the game in week 1 and why they're struggling so much against a Bucs team that had no pass rush whatsoever last year. So it just seems a little bit off at the moment in Detroit. They'll probably figure it out, and the O-line will probably play better, and that will lift or bring the Jared Goff boat closer to shore, or however you use that analogy. But I think that it will be better. Golf, but at the moment it is very shaky. And I think he's kind of reminded people that, if you kind of remove context, I don't think Jared Goff is materially better than Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr. I think these are all pretty similar levels.
Yeah. And certainly right now.
Yeah.
He's not better than any of those guys.
No, he's much worse than all three of them.
Got a question for you about the Lions. Dan Campbell taking a step back this year for some reason in his just ability to facilitate solid coaching? What's going on with him?
I don't know. I think the thing with Campbell is that he gets conflated with analytics all the time because he goes for it on 4th down every time. But just bashing the yes button doesn't conflate to some deeper philosophical bent towards making the optimal decision. So I don't know with Dan Campbell. I mean, the culture stuff, which is really his calling card, it's just impossible for me to evaluate. how valuable is it that he created a culture where Ben Johnson doesn't want to take a head coaching job and wants to stick around in Detroit? Like that's probably that's more valuable than, you know, losing like 3% win probability or whatever on a 4th down call. But it's just really tough to evaluate the coaches who don't own one side of the ball and play the kind of CEO role. Like, you know, and it's different. Like we've seen enough from John Harbaugh that we probably know that he's a really good coach, but with Dan Campbell, it's a little bit more difficult to assess. So we'll see. I mean, everything right now is just breaking because of Goff. Defense looks great. Defense looks better than it did last year. But Goff needs to get fixed, and the offensive line is going to have to help him there. All right. Dominate this NFL season with a Fantasy Life Plus subscription. Get weekly rankings, start sit advice, DFS analysis, and betting tools. Use promo code season20 for 20% off. Go to fantasylife.com/rotoworld to learn more.
As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up to BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code BETEDGE. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code BETEDGE when you sign up. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
Okay, let's close out by talking Offensive Player of the Year, a market dear to my heart. We're talking about before we see Saquon Barkley and Bijan Robinson in Monday Night Football. They are two of the top 6 favorites. Saquon is the favorite, which I think is a little bit silly. He is plus 550, CeeDee Lamb plus 750, Justin Jefferson 10-1, Tyreek 12-1, Breece Hall 14-1, Bijan 16-1. Certainly the guy who's going to be everyone's popular pick and bet this week is Nico Collins, who's 16-1. What do you make of this market? Anyone who stands out to you?
So I should be, I guess, candid about where I was preseason on this. I have Nico Collins 66-1 in pocket, and it's very tough for me to not see upside still. And maybe that's just hopefulness, but absolutely feels like this is set up well for this to be a wide receiver award this year. I don't think any of the situations going on with the running backs across the NFL, Saquon Barkley included, warrant realistic consideration to be OPOY. I think this is going to go to your top fantasy wide receiver. I think Justin Jefferson should be the favorite. I think 10-1 is intriguing. I would put Nico Collins second. I think Tyreek Hill has to be dropped way down, particularly considering he has his own injury risks, and now there are questions about the kind of viability of the Dolphins' offense in going forward for at least the next couple weeks, if not longer. And similarly, there's nothing about the Dallas offense to me that screams longevity with CeeDee Lamb, even though he is a volume monster in that offense. But I don't mind him being in the top 5 in terms of choices. CMC, obviously, a huge step backwards with the IR. In fact, he is not even realistically a candidate at this point. I think just as I go through the list of running backs, I have some Breece Hall. I don't think that's happening. I have no Bijan Robinson. I don't think that's happening. And I think just the way that the season has started and broken in terms of injuries and just who's going to have kind of wide receiver 1 opportunities and talent and really is going to stand out on a winning team. It's Nico Collins. And I think but that said, it's going to take a special season from him, and continuing to perform at this level to be able to beat out a player who's as talented as Justin Jefferson. So, if I was making the market right now, I would have Jefferson small favorite over Nico.
Okay, I think the thing with this market is it has to be very flat at the moment because no one has really separated themselves, and no one seems to be in a position right now where you can project that they are going to separate themselves with a great deal of confidence. So that will likely happen at some point. Whereas last year, I thought the rort in this market was that 3-4 weeks in, it was very clear that McCaffrey, Tyreek, and Jefferson were just a tier above everyone else, just in terms of the combination of just the sheer volume they were getting, their talent, and the team success, at least, and that's what held Jefferson back of that trio. This year, it's just a little bit all over the place. The fact that McCaffrey is dead in the market, the fact that Tyreek Hill basically just lost a game last Thursday where he got 24 yards or whatever, and now has to deal with this uncertainty with Tua. The running backs, it's all a little bit uncertain. It was a little bit weird that Braylon Allen got so much work for the Jets, and it really worked for them, which I don't think bodes well for Breece Hall going forward. To me, the most interesting thing that I've seen in this market, and this comment may become a little obsolete by the time people hear it, but week one, Bijan Robinson played 90% of the snaps and had 18 of the 21 running back carries. So look, no one feels great about the Falcons, but they're like Bijan's getting workhorse workload. And if they turn the corner and Cousins turns the corner, then I think he's going to be right there. With Nico, who I think can absolutely win, his issue is just that it's just hard when there are that many guys on the offense, when there's Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell and Joe Mixon. We'll see about the injury. It doesn't seem like he's going to be out for 8 weeks or anything. Slowick likes to run the ball. It's a Shanahan offense. The pass rate over expectation was underwater last season, and I believe in week one as well. I can't recall what it was on Sunday night, but it's just there are a few things working against Nico as opposed to guys like, Justin Jefferson, who is the alpha and omega of his offense and should just, be guzzling up north of a 30% target share every week, whereas Nico's at 28%, and that might even, maybe that's where you'd probably set the mark around, and he can certainly win. Don't feel great about CD Lamb, certainly not at price. I agree with you. I think Jefferson is the single most likely player to win, though I don't think there's a lot of meat on the bone at price. And then I just think that there's 12 guys who should be in the 10-1 to 30-1 range. And it just needs to be really bunched up. And I don't think there's anyone who's super appealing at price at the moment. The guy I would probably watch the most intently would be Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had massive amount of targets from Jared Goff. And if that team is perhaps not as dominant as we think they're going to be, perhaps they're not going to be running the ball as much to salt away games in the fourth quarter. Because Amon-Ra St. Brown, he has the talent. He was pretty close to OPOY production last year. Seems like the injury that he had is just contusion and cramping, so it seems like he'll be fine. They play for the season 14 of the 17 games are indoors, which helps as well. They're not losing games to weather like Jamar Chase will likely do. So he would be the guy at price in the 20-1 to even up to 30-1 range. He's out there. That would probably be the guy, but I'm more taking a wait and see approach with this market.
Yeah. Couple of guys I want your opinion on, see if you think they've shortened enough. J.K. Dobbins, has he shortened enough?
Think so. He's getting 50% of the carries. Are there worlds where he could take over the backfield entirely? Potentially, but just with his injury history, with the relationship with Gus Edwards and Greg Roman, with the fact that, we're so biased by the first two games we've seen. The Chargers have been leading all throughout both the games they played, playing the Raiders and the Panthers. It's going to get harder. With Dobbins and a lot of all the Dobbins stuff with comeback player of the year too, their next two games are against the Steelers and the Chiefs. And so I would rather take a little bit of a hit on price and just see what he looks like.
Yeah. Okay. Huge injury red flag too. Two wide receivers. I'm curious your opinion on. first personal favorite of mine, and a guy who maybe has had the most outstanding catch of the season to this point. Mike Evans, shortened enough?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just tough for Evans to have, like, when you talk about like who's going to win Offensive Player of the Year, like, you have to be the best. You have to be number one. Like Evans, I think, is a type of guy who could finish like fifth, sixth type, but to actually be the number one wide receiver, what you probably need is like 1,700 receiving yards and double-digit touchdowns, and that for a guy as kind of entrenched as Evans, and also like Evans had a phenomenal year last year. And he came down with a lot of 50-50 deep balls, and he wasn't really close to this conversation. So I wouldn't say he's like 0%, but I think it's going to be fairly uphill, particularly with like Chris Godwin as the number one PFF grade of all wide receivers. Like he's
right.
as well.
He's going to have some. I think he's going to have some record-setting moments potentially, at least career longevity stuff. I wonder if he gets like a look or a sniff at OPOY based on sort of just a lifetime achievement award type of thing. And 80-1 it's just a massive number, and I like what I'm seeing with the pass offense in Tampa in general. The other guy, I was curious if you have any appetite for Rashee Rice, 50-1.
Thought about Rashee Rice. Certainly it helps that Hollywood Brown is out for the season. Probably helps a little bit too that Pacheco is out long term, so they're going to be throwing the ball more.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit difficult with just how egalitarian that offense is. And also the fact that I was looking at Rashee Rice before he played against the Bengals and what his OPOY prospects were at that time. And I think the issue is just that, again, he has to be the best receiver in the NFL. And last season, he topped 75 yards four times. And he's topped 75 yards in his career like 4 times, I think. So I get it. Like, he's Patrick Mahomes' number one wide receiver. The offensive line is a bit of a concern. And the fact that the offense overall looked very 2023 regular season-ish for the Chiefs is a concern. But again, like Rice he's another guy I would put in that massive bunch of candidates who, if it breaks right, like other guys too, like look at Jamar Chase's schedule coming up. Like, it's an absolute cakewalk. Yeah. He's playing teams like he's got the Commanders on Monday Night Football. Like, what do you think Jamar Chase is going to do to the Commanders secondary? Like, everyone's kind of
probably 185 yards. Yeah.
He's like Garrett Wilson, who hasn't done anything statistically yet. Still Aaron Rodgers' number one wide receiver. They're going to build more of a rapport as they get going. Jonathan Taylor was running for like 8 yards a carry yesterday. And the Colts, everyone's written off the Colts. They're still only they're plus 300 to make the playoffs. And they're probably going to have to start leaning into the run a lot more. And Jonathan Taylor is an OPOY level talent. So like all of these guys, like there are worlds where they can win. Everyone has dismissed quarterbacks from this award. Like, if there's no standout skill position player, you think that like Josh Allen or Josh Allen, or if Lamar Jackson turns it around and puts up like historic rushing plus passing numbers, or Kyler Murray, like I wouldn't put a total line through all those guys, though it's uphill, particularly with ranked choice for a quarterback to win, given this is kind of now the best non-QB offensive player. So look, I just think that this is a very flat field at the moment. And the best bet, and no one's offering it to my knowledge, but just backing like the no side of Saquon Barkley plus 550, because I don't think he's like massively more likely than any of these type of guys to win.
Yeah, a lot of mouths to feed in Philly.
Yep, indeed. All right. That is it for us for now. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. Myself and Drew Dinsick. We'll see you soon.